Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Hunt. I'm a partner here at the law firm McVeigh Fleming, where I run the immigration team. And we're looking today at the Parent Boost visitor visa instructions. Years after it was first announced at the last election by several parties as a way for New Zealanders to have their families with them in New Zealand, we now have details on how the Parent Boost visa, visitor visa will work, the PVVV. The terms will be welcome news to many residents and citizens in New Zealand if they meet the criteria. Now we're going to look at a few of the changes. These aren't available yet online in the operational manual, but they are being sent out to us earlier today, and we've gone through them in several hours to understand them, and we're going to go through a few of them with you now on the screen. So the idea put forward was that it was better for people to have the option to have their parents nearby, as long as the cost of their parents being here was not met by the country. This has been covered in the purpose of the Parent Boost Visitor Visa to enable family unification, support labour force participation of citizens and residents with childcare responsibilities, attract and retain skilled migrants, and improve settlement outcomes. Now, at its most basic, this is a 5-year visa with the possibility of getting a second one granted, available to parents of citizens and residents, allowing for them to remain in New Zealand for that 10-year period. Of course, there are a lot of exclusions, conditions, exceptions. We're going to go through a few of those today. It is important to remember that this is based on the instructions we received just this morning. This visa is not available yet. We don't know how immigration is going to how to do their own interpretation of these instructions. So we're basing it on our interpretation and our experience with immigration and as lawyers. The visa applications themselves open at the end of next month, so still more than a month away, and probably have more discussions and questions raised in that period. The changes are 25 pages long, most of that being new instructions, some pages basically just being some tweaks. So we're not going to cover every single word, we're going to cover the factors which we believe will be important to most of you. If you do want to know more, or any questions you've got, please let us know. If you want us to assist you with an application, please let us know. Okay, so who is eligible? So this is open to any person who has a child in New Zealand who's a resident or visa holder or citizen, as long as they're 18 years and older. And we're going to call them New Zealanders from now on. So if we say New Zealanders, we mean citizens and residents. It also includes the applicant's partner, as long as they are living together, but there is no minimum period of living together before they can be included, which is unusual, but good, fair enough. Okay, so the eligibility also extends to legal guardians and grandparents where the parent may have passed away, and it can be shown that the sponsor spent a lot of their childhood being raised by the applicant. It does look like there has been an attempt to limit the number of grandparents or guardians a person can sponsor to 2, being 1 and their partner, but the drafting's kind of poor and unclear, so we're not quite sure as to whether that was an intention. It's just not well written, that part there is. You cannot have dependent children. The definition of dependent children in this visa is slightly different than we have with work visas or with residence visas, sort of in between the two. It includes any child under 18 who are, it requires you not to apply to any children who are under 18 who are single, not living with a partner and are reliant on their parent, whether they live with you or not. Also includes children who are 18 and 19 who are single with no children of their own and are totally reliant on their parents. So if you have either of those, you're not eligible for this application. Now, an unmarried child of 18 will be presumed to be dependent unless evidence shows otherwise, which is kind of unusual. So children of 18, 19, they're basically saying that evidence of actual dependence may be required, so they're asking you to prove evidence that you have a dependent child, so you're not eligible, which seems to be very backwards. You're going to provide evidence that you're not eligible. Don't know how that's going to work, but we're going to find out more, I suppose, over time. I'm not sure how they're going to compel you to provide that. Now, okay, so who can sponsor? Now, as this is only open to parents of New Zealanders, it's not open to parents of other visa holders. So if you are on a work visa, student visa, that sort of thing, you cannot sponsor your parents to be there. There must be a requirement for you to be indefinitely in the country, so a right to be indefinitely, which means citizenship or residency. Doesn't require PR, doesn't require a minimum period of residence. So unlike, say, parent retirement, you require 3 years of residence visa holder. This does not require that 3-year period. Sponsor can be a sole person, or it can be that person and their partner, or it can be siblings. Now, if there is a partner involved, it is required to live with them for at least 12 months in a genuine stable relationship. It's also a requirement that the sponsor is also ordinarily resident in New Zealand, meaning they basically live in New Zealand, and they're required to be here going forward for at least 184 days per year to maintain that residency in the country going forward. Proof of funds. Now, there are 3 ways that someone can show they won't be reliant on the country. This is the big thing about this visa. It's basically you can be here as long as you're not going to be reliant on the country for costs and you have your family or yourself to support you. Now, there's 3 ways to show that. Their own money, their own income, or the income of the sponsors. Now, for their own money, or maintenance funds as they call it, they need to show that a sole applicant has $160,000 or $250,000 if there's going to be a couple applying, in funds to live off. Now, this must be funds, money that is not owed to somebody else. It can be held in a local bank or overseas as long as it's accessible from New Zealand. When you get money out of the bank, the primary applicant can use their own funds as well as funds that they own together with their partner, but they cannot include funds that are solely owned by the partner in the application, which for us is old-fashioned. It's backwards. The old days where you have a breadwinner and then you might have a joint account. Nowadays you may have both people in the relationship who are earning their own money individually, and I don't see why we can't be including both together, why it has to be either the primary applicant or joint held account. Hopefully at some point immigration will change this viewpoint, this old-fashioned viewpoint, but we'll see how it goes. The officer handling the application needs to be satisfied that the funds are genuinely available, which may mean showing the source of the funds, that they actually are your funds, how you obtain them. The funds cannot be gifted, meaning that you cannot have the sponsor providing you with some money and saying, here, mum, dad, here's some money for you to come on this visa. They cannot gift the money. It must be money that you've earned or obtained in some legal way. The second option is under annual income. Now, this must be at least $32,611.28 for a sole applicant, or $49,552.88 for a couple. It needs to have been earned in the last 12 months before the application was made, and there needs to be an expectation that they're going to be earning it going forward. That has shown that it's going to be an income ongoing. So you can't go and sell the asset or the property that made that money from as you get the application, because that money income has now vanished. We're looking at things like pensions, rental properties, dividends, interest, profits, trading in shares, that sort of thing. The amount calculated as being gross income, so before tax, but less any expenses that were incurred in gaining that income. So any costs of renting out a property, any repairs, that's an expense you can't include. That has to be taken off that gross income. You'll see that wages and salaries are not on the list. Now, the reason for this is that someone can't continue to work in a job on this visa in New Zealand. You cannot be working on this visa while here, which means you can't have income we've had in the past included in that money going forward. It has to be a passive income, passive money coming in. Okay, now, finally, there is the sponsorship of a child, that child and their partner, or by siblings, the children. It's based on the sponsor's earnings, the minimum required amount in the 2 of the past 3 years, the tax year. So that's 1 April to 31st of March. If there are 2 sponsors, it has to be the same 2 years for both sponsors, unless there's been a parental leave in situation involved, which they can sort of be in that role. The amount required for a single person sponsoring a single parent is the median wage. So $33.56 per hour, calculated at 40 hours per week, not 30 hours as usual with immigration. This is a 40-hour week, making it $69,804.80 per annum. So it's under $70,000 per year. If you add a second sponsor, we then add another half of the median to that, puts it back at $104,707 if you sort of add an extra person. So if you add another parent to sponsor, same thing, you add on an extra half of the median. So for example, a couple sponsoring 2 parents is $139,609.60 per annum before tax. That's the required earnings of the 2 of them for at least 2 of the past 3 years. With the maximum number of parents a person can bring in being 6, the amount really does scale up as you sort of go to the higher figures, into the sort of $200,000 if you want to sponsor 6 parents yourself or with your partner. 6 parents, of course, being the parent and perhaps their partners. Okay, on that basis, if you're already sponsoring 2 people and you want to sponsor another, then immigration is going to go, okay, can you afford to sponsor 3? And that 3rd person will be looked at on that factor of, is your median salary for your partner combined above the threshold for 3 people. If so, great. If not, then the third person's not going to be able to be sponsored. Okay, so health requirements. Health requirements is where we have sort of a lot of questions as to how this is going to work. We're sort of seeing things coming through now. The original application must be made offshore, and the visa can't be granted while the person is onshore. So you have to be offshore for both the application and the granting of the visa. And the reason for this is that Immigration New Zealand want to properly review the medical status of the applicant before the visa is granted. If there was any significant issues, INZ can decline the visa and the applicant would already be offshore and can't come in. There's nothing to prevent someone from applying for the visa and then entering the country on another visa, say a general visitor visa or a visa waiver, and being in the country while it's being processed and then leaving the country for it to be granted. That's not explicitly prevented. You could do that. We'll wait to see how they'll handle that situation. Would they say to you, hey, leave the country, then we'll give you a decision. We'll wait and see. Now, for the medical, you can only rely on a medical that provided in the last 12 months. So if you provided a medical and an X-ray in a previous application in the last 12 months, that can be reused. If not, if it's more than 12 months since that medical or X-ray, you'll require a new one. Now, for the insurance, the base requirement is $250,000 per annum for emergency medical care expenses, $100,000 for cancer coverage, $250,000 to cover repatriation in the event of serious illness or disability. I'm assuming this means back to the country of origin, it doesn't actually state it in the instructions, and $50,000 for the remains to be returned back to country of origin. It states it in that one there. So $250,000, $100,000, $250,000, $50,000. That's the requirements for the insurance you're going to have. And we're going to still expect to see insurers starting to provide packages aimed at this visa type. Now, it can be either through health insurance or travel insurance. The company must have an experience with that industry, so health or travel insurance business. It can't be a new company. It can't be a company that's going into this new area of practice. It has to be already doing that area. And it is required to have an internationally recognised standard, like a standard of PAWS, of at least an A. It has to be a generally good standard. Now, A, standard of PAWS, A is not sort of top class. There is sort of like A and AA and AAA. So A is reasonably good, but it's not requiring exceptional insurance. But it is required to have that international review of the insurance to say, yes, this is good enough, they're going to pay their bills. It can be an offshore insurance provider. That's fine. It doesn't have to be New Zealand based, so that is completely fine. Now, the insurance may have exclusions for pre-existing conditions relating to emergency medical care or cancer coverage. Now, this may sound unusual at first, that you can get this insurance with exclusions, but I'll explain this in a moment as to why that's not so unusual and why it probably won't help you out in any way. There are no words yet on who is providing sufficient insurance, but we think we're going to see more companies coming through in the next sort of few weeks offering this insurance now that these policies are out. Now, once the application has been processed, you'll get an approval in principle, and at that point there you have to provide them with evidence of 12 months of that insurance. Once provided and they can confirm that, they can then grant you that visa. At that point, you'll have 6 months to enter the country on that visa. Now, at any time that you are in New Zealand, you must maintain that insurance. So while the first one's for 12 months, if you're here for longer than 12 months, you probably will be, you need to get more insurance in place to maintain that insurance while you are onshore. If you do leave the country for a while, you're not required to have insurance while you're not in the country, so that is fine. It's only when you're actually in New Zealand on this visa you must have that insurance cover. I'm now going to bring us to the first of the additional requirements, which are likely to catch people out. This is an unusual set of requirements that definitely are new for this visa. So after 3 years have passed on this visa and before the 4th year starts, you have to leave New Zealand and get another medical and X-ray done at a panel physician offshore. You have to wait offshore while this is being processed. You also have to provide with that immigration evidence that you held insurance or travel insurance or health insurance during all periods you were in New Zealand. So if you're in New Zealand and you haven't had that insurance, it's going to cause you an issue when you go for this 3-year check. There is an allowance for errors made by banks and insurance companies. That if they've made an error somewhere and your insurance wasn't covered and it wasn't in your control, nice little touch there for immigration to think of that possibility, but it's going to be a very rare situation, we think. Now, you must remain offshore while the medical and compliance are being checked. Once confirmed, you can then re-enter the country. This might take, well, we don't know how long it's going to take. it's still more than 3 years away before this is even going to be a requirement. This is at the 3-year point of having the visa. But if you did have a medical issue, and with the elderly that's more likely, it could mean several months offshore while there was some back and forward on that medical issue, or even just the processing time. If there's lots at once, it could be a delayed process. We just don't know yet. Now, on confirmation, they can enter New Zealand and continue their time in the country, but just for the sake of clarity, any time you're offshore waiting for this process doesn't mean extra time at the end of your visa. Your visa is being used up during this process. So you have that 5 years from that first entry, even though you're going to be offshore for that period, as required by immigration. Now, we've covered the time required to be offshore before you apply for this offshore. We've also covered the requirement to be offshore at the 3-year period to get this test done. You're also required to be offshore for at least 90 days prior to applying for your second visa, because you have 2 of these visas, one 5 years and then a second 5 years. You're required to be offshore for at least 90 days before that second one can be granted. And if you and your partner who are together in the application, it's 90 days from the last person who left New Zealand. So if you leave first and your partner leaves after you, 90 days after when your partner has left outside the country before that next visa can be granted. So you can apply for that visa and then wait, and then it can be ready to go. And they can actually even grant it to you. Sorry, they can grant you the visa, but there'll be a condition on there that you cannot enter the country until that 90-day period has ended, which is a new twist. We've often seen you must enter by this date. This will say you can only enter after this date. So there'll be a little twist in that requirement there. So you're going to have another 3 months outside the country there to add to the previous time offshore. Other factors to be aware of, the PBVV applicants are not eligible for a medical waiver. So if INZ was to detect a factor, an issue that is by default seen as being a cost to New Zealand, so then we would require a medical waiver. Typically, no medical waiver is possible. Now, for elderly, this will be most likely down to costs of requirements for hospitalisation or perhaps for medication. And there's no consideration given the fact that you have insurance cover, because the insurance cover will expire at some point. So immigration are being very cautious around this. So if there is a health issue that would require a waiver, you will not get this visa because a waiver will not be granted. Sponsors will, of course, throughout this be liable for any costs that are raised by the people they are sponsoring. But yes, the costs will be there. Now, if anyone wants to be applying for or had applied for a parent resident visa and gone into the draw, either at the EOI or the application itself, or once you're drawn, that sort of thing, there's a requirement for them to check that you have maintained insurance while on shore on the PBVV, and that you paid any outstanding debt to the government while being on the PBVV. So so when you're applying for the EOI, when the EOI is drawn, and when you make the application at SWAF, at all 3 times you must be compliant with this visa and have paid any debts that are required to the government. And that's it. That's our relatively quick overview of the instructions. There'll be change to the operational manual in the next week or 2. We're taking clients on now for the parent boost visitor visa, and if you want our services, we are providing a discount for the next couple of months just to try and get as many people as possible into that process and get this visa going as fast as we can. Until next time, Aaron Hunt from McVeigh Fleming, ka kite anō.